A capsized container ship still blocks an important shipping channel offshore from Brunswick, Georgia. The Coast Guard warning the resolution may take a long time.
This is a complex salvage case, and it is not going to be quick. I would say we're going to measure this in weeks, possibly months, as opposed to hours and days.
That's Coast Guard Commander Norm Witt, who says salvage operators are trying to determine if that container ship, which is carrying about 4,000 automobiles, can be refloated. The cause of that capsize is still under investigation. Texas has killed a killer. 37-year-old Mark Anthony Solis getting a lethal injection at the state penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas last evening for the June 2010 slaying of 61-year-old Nancy Weatherly during a robbery at her home. In his last words, Solis apologized to the woman's family members. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hulu is all your TV in one place, plus more. Watch thousands of hit shows, movies, and award-winning Hulu originals for only $5.99 per month. It's TV without the cable contract and the freedom of on-demand streaming. Get current network shows from ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, and binge-watch every season of your favorite cable shows. Premium Hulu viewing is brought to you by Proline Automotive and AB Sports, Guam's store for Nike. To advertise on Hulu, call Choice Digital at 989-0042.
When you think about better water, think Kinetico softened water. Kinetico water conditioners work like no other, supplying a continuous flow of luxuriously soft water without disruption and without use of electricity. After all, better water flows from better thinking. Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301 or email info@americanwatertech.com.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie. And now, sitting in for the vacationing Bob Klitzkie, here's Daryl Taggarty.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Good afternoon and welcome to Tall Tales for a Wednesday, September 11th, 2019. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. Bob will be back in 26 days. Count them, 26. Yeah, I'm still adjusting myself here. So I pull into the studio. And so he sent me an interesting monologue called My Lazy Pistol. I'm going to hold that back, and we'll continue with our Second Amendment portion of the show with a piece I was starting to read yesterday that was called Lies the Left Tells About Guns. And I'm waiting on my Facebook page to come up here so I can see those of you who are signing on. The telephone number here at the studio is 888-8255. If you got something on your mind, you're welcome to check in that way. Otherwise, you can come on board on Facebook Live. And there we are. There we are. Good. And welcome. So on this article, Lies the Left Tells About Guns, it lists some of the worst offenses. Unfortunately, the current rhetoric coming from Democrats betrays a deep misunderstanding of all these things. He talks about at the beginning of the article. Yesterday, we read comments from Bernie Sanders and Dianne Feinstein, and then the rebuttal in this article. Today, we will look at Beto O'Rourke and Kamala Harris. Beto O'Rourke said, Americans who own AR-15s, AK-47s, will have to sell them to the government. And so, the response and explanation from American Greatness website says, yes, the mandatory buyback. O'Rourke gets so much wrong here. First among them, as Matt Walsh has pointed out, is the concept of the back in buy back. That assumes assumes that Americans will be returning their guns to the original owner, which is the government? No. It's also a misnomer to say that the government would be buying anything. That suggests choice, when this is very much a mandate. Moreover, the government would be, quote, buying guns from legal gun owners and reimbursing them with their own tax dollars. Since 1986, Congress has forbidden gun makers from even producing fully automatic weapons for the civilian market. In Walsh's phrasing, a mandatory buyback is like calling an armed robbery a compelled donation. Experts who have studied gun buyback programs done at the state level say they are largely ineffective at reducing crime rates or gun violence. In the words of one expert, the impact of buybacks on crime was, quote, not statistically significant. In other words, buybacks are good for photo ops and when you're trying to jumpstart a foundering presidential campaign, but they don't actually get crime off the streets. And he takes issue with this following quote from Kamala Harris. As president, I will take executive action to ban the importation of AR-15 style assault weapons. Some things to clear up here. AR does not stand for assault rifle. An AR-15 is not, in fact, an assault rifle because it fires only one round with each pull of the trigger. Again, there is no fixed legal definition for assault weapon. An AR-15 is classified as a modern sporting rifle used for hunting, competition shooting, and home defense, and one of the most popular firearms being sold today. Upwards of 16 million Americans own them. Even with that many purchases, AR-15s and similar sporting rifles still comprise only 3% of the total civilian arsenal of approximately 310 million firearms. Automatic weapons have been heavily regulated since the National Firearms Act of 1934. AR-15s are legal to own in most states, provided that the purchaser passes the mandatory FBI background check required for all retail firearm purchases. Oh, and one more thing. The vast majority of AR-15s are manufactured in the United States, so an import ban would be meaningless. Okay, and tomorrow we'll take a look at quotations by David Axelrod and Chuck Schumer, and that for our Second Amendment portion of today's show. I'll put that there, and now it's time for Zami Ikatni. And in our Zami Ikatni, we have a Guam Daily Post editorial, able-bodied jobless adults will soon stop getting food stamps. Gov Guam must help them. And for the Pacific Daily News, they reprint a USA Today editorial called Close Gun Loopholes. We will dispense with the PDN USA Today editorial as not being of local import. And take a look at the Guam Daily Post editorial and see. It's also it amplifies or attempts to synthesize information that was reported on page 1 of today's Guam Daily Post. Food stamp rules tighten for adults. And this is the way the editorial reads. It's been 23 years since the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996 became law. This federal law requires able-bodied adults to get a stable job if they want to continue to get food stamp assistance from Uncle Sam, i.e., American taxpayers. The law generally barred unemployed adults ages 18 to 49 who are not disabled or not raising minor children from receiving SNAP or food stamp benefits for more than 3 months in any 3-year period without holding at least 20 hours of work a week or 80 hours in a month. For more than 2 decades, the government of Guam, through the Gutierrez, Camacho, and Calvo administrations, successfully received a federal waiver from this work requirement. Adults who were able to work didn't have to and still could get food stamps if they met the income threshold. Now, reality will sink in for many able-bodied adults on Guam who've gotten help from the food stamp program to survive. On October 1st, less than 3 weeks from now, Guamanian adults who have relied on food stamps can no longer get an extension after 3 months of having received the benefit. In April, the Guam Attorney General's office tried to join other states in trying to get an extension of the waiver from the U.S. Food and Nutrition Service. But the Guam Department of Public Health and Social Services announced Tuesday that the waiver request was turned down. For many adults living in poverty, this rule change may come as a major shock. For GovGuam, the next step must include providing a wider safety net that will be meaningful. Instead of handouts, adults who need work must be properly trained for available jobs and must be helped to develop the skills and mindset to become self-sufficient. It's going to be a challenge for the program recipients and for GovGuam. What's certain is that GovGuam should have known this day would come. In a few weeks, it will be a new reality for many. And of course, you can read more details about this on page 1 of the Guam Daily Post. Food stamp rules tighten for adults. But as the editorial reads, I'm sorry. Are we confused here? Just looking at the time frame cited in the article, 23 years, April 2019, October 1st, 2019. Now, the next step, properly trained for available jobs and must be helped to develop the skills and mindset to be self-sufficient. GovGuam should have known this day would come in a few weeks. Those are all time references. Let's be clear. GovGuam should already have been helping them, or is helping them, with the current workforce development / apprenticeship / training programs / education. Is the proximate task today routine program entitlements, skills development, or survival? Seems to be a parallel here to the story of the Trump tax cuts that we saw coming but did nothing until revenues started to track lower, then passed a temporary tax increase with a plan to cut government costs, then got comfortable with the results so that nothing else was needed. Are we going to start an emergency food program for current beneficiaries not given longer range notice by the government that their food stamps would be cut so they don't have to resort to crime or mooch off others who are eligible or working? I just think that editorial writers should home in on the essential problem. Describe what the essential problem is. How many currently receiving food stamps cannot meet this? Anybody bother to ask? Or even for an estimate? And how many of them can simply turn to somebody else and say, I'm hungry, I need food? Many already may be. But just think about households and relationships in this day and age. Or are we talking about people losing benefits? Or to some degree, we're talking about those people. In other cases, we're talking about people who are going to lose benefits because they haven't qualified on paper. They haven't turned in the right documents, or they can't document because the work they're doing is of a temporary nature or off-book nature, or life of crime is more is easier. And simply not receiving any food money means they're going to have to work a little harder at their crime in order to eat. Or are we talking about people actually like starving on the streets? Only those able-bodied, not otherwise unable to work, what's that, 18 to 49 years old. How long does it take to train someone to change their whole lifestyle? And that's what the poll and the Guam Daily Post is recommending for the government to do, which it's already doing. But it has never been cross-referenced to these people that have been receiving food stamps under a waiver. And they didn't know about the waiver. It's not their responsibility to understand that the waiver has been requested and approved for so many years. They're just enjoying their eligibility. And the government of Guam has known this since it requested for the waiver to be renewed in April. And that's when the alarm should have been sounded. Was it? Was it a story in the Post? And now they just haven't bothered to mention it again? This is pretty important when you consider the numbers of people who this affects. How many? Only food stamp people would know. They have all the numbers. But those numbers aren't here. Let's see. Gaynor Delino is the one who wrote the article, and perhaps that should have been one of those questions. How many people are affected? And certainly it should have been in the waiver request. And so I've had to kind of explain this to Bob Klitzkie about being stingy on handing out blue stars. But I want the editorial writers to put out more complete information than that which is included in the story of the day. Not just musings on the story of the day, and taking a position without any background information being considered at all, or digging down deeper to find out just what is the dimension of this problem. And we're going to see when people start not able to get their food stamps. They're standing there with a card that doesn't give them any, has no credit against it. So that's the Zami Ikatni portion of today's show. We'll just leave closed gun loopholes aside from USA Today, and no star awarded to either editorial page today. And, you know, I do list every day I'm here other editorials or stories worthy of comment. Ooh, that is hot. And under the subtitle caption of "Every Picture Tells a Story," I've got 3 pictures today that if you were paying attention to the newspaper, you'd see these same pictures. And so I'm going to talk about this. The first one is attached to a story in the Guam Daily Post on page 12 entitled "DIY TV Host to Speak at Guam Labor Forum." Now, we've been hearing about the apprenticeship industry forum on November 12 and 13. That's a good month from now, down at Dusatani Guam Resort, with the theme "Let's Get to Work, Hire Guam." And today, in this article, the DIY TV host, Kayleen McCabe, a general contractor who won her own television series by beating out dozens of male competitors, will be the keynote speaker for the November forum. And this leads up to the picture I want to say. There's a picture of Kayleen McCabe standing over what looks to be a gas-powered, like a chainsaw, cement cutter with a 15-inch blade. So it's a gas-powered tool with a 15-inch blade, and she's supposed to be a general contractor, TV host, and marketer. And she's standing there without protective gear, no safety shoes, nothing on her legs to prevent the debris from this cutting tool from scouring her ankles or calves. She's holding it down below between her legs and pushing down on the cement slab. You know, if she hits a rebar, there's going to be sparks. Piece of the blade could come off. She should be wearing jeans. But just looking at the picture, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then here's just some of those 1,000. She doesn't appear to have the muscular development of a person who is used to handling a power tool of this weight and size. The 15-inch cutting wheel and gas-powered motor like a chainsaw. No safety shoes, no sturdy pants to protect your legs from flying debris of the cut. No apparent eye protection. Who is this picture trying to attract or to convey competence or confidence? I look at this picture and I cringe, because if I saw anybody trying to operate a tool in this manner, I would run. And I'd be prepared to I'd run to it at a distance, because even where the person is taking this picture from doesn't look safe. Be that as it may. If I was there, I would run away from this site and stand far enough away with my phone on the ready to call 911, because it just looks like an accident ready to happen. That's the first picture. And I'm surprised that she would put something like that into her promotion. She may know what to say in front of an enthralled audience, but she sure doesn't follow even basic OSHA requirements for safety using power tools. And on page 8 of Pacific Daily News, the entire page is given to 5 pictures. It's just, you know, if every picture tells a story and a picture is worth 1,000 words, well, and it says in the caption, certified health physicist, a certified health physicist with the Armed Forces Radiobiology Research Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. And another one, a certified health physicist with the U.S. Army Public Health Center, headquartered at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. And then a couple of other pictures of course participants, held at the Guam National Guard's Readiness Center in Barragata on Tuesday. So Rick Cruz took the pictures for the PDN, but medical effects of ionizing radiation. But there isn't a story here? What is the story behind this whole page of pictures? We see the title of the talk, and in the pictures we see lots of graphics. But they don't say, one of them says, exposure to the population of the United States. Ionizing radiation exposure to the general population. So what scenarios were posited to frame this information and the assessment procedures or response? Was this medical continuing education? Were these only for the National Guard, or did it also include active duty Navy and Air Force? How about civil defense or Homeland Security? Or GMH? Or licensed handlers of obsolete X-ray equipment? I mean, are we talking about downwinders? Are we talking about response to a nuclear accident or a near miss by a nuclear weapon thrown from North Korea or China? And what's the response going to be? And how the local medical authorities need to have certain equipment and training, to do the assessment, and to triage. Medical effects of ionizing radiation. There isn't a story here? Just amazing. Amazing, amazing what passes for journalism these days. And the third picture, before our next break. In the PDN on page 16 today is a cartoon, and there's a couple of generals standing there. One is got like a Army or Marine type uniform, and the other one looks like an Air Force uniform. Generals, both of them generals. And they're looking at a private, and he's yelling, bang, 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 and he's holding a banana. The two generals are saying to one's saying to the other one, maybe diverting military funding for Trump's wall is having a slight impact on our readiness. Again, the private is standing there aiming a banana, going bang, 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 verbally. Okay, that's the third cartoon. But I looked at this and said, well, maybe this really applies to a very serious question we have here, and that is the building of the shooting ranges for the Marines. It has to do with military readiness. And that's where the money went bye-bye for the wall. So that's what the cartoon was about. And so those are the three pictures telling a story or not telling a story, as the case may be. It's 4:30, 4:31. Real Joe, it's about time for our break. Let's go ahead and take a break here, and afterwards I'd be welcoming your calls at 888-8255.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Everybody's heard about the bird, the bird, bird, bird.
Circle K has a 3-pound rotisserie chicken, now available for the introductory price of $9.99. It's the biggest, tastiest, and most affordable rotisserie chicken of its kind on island. Save even more by getting a family meal with 2 sides and a bottle of wine for only $25.99. The Circle K rotisserie chicken. Get yours today. Circle K. Take it easy.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255. And now, sitting in for the vacationing Bob Klitzkie, here's Daryl Taggarty.
And on Facebook Live, we've got a comment from Tito Guay talking about some of the story about the food stamps being cut. He asks, does anyone have data, info, or know what the unemployment rate is for the last 8 years has been on Guam? I've been asking government officials, official experts. No one has an answer. That's a first. Lastima. Experts. Well, you know, Gary over at Department of Labor has been tracking the labor statistics and unemployment numbers for the last, 30 years or so? He's been working that job. So call over to the Department of Labor and ask for Gary and see about the where they post these. They might be online somewhere, Tito, because those unemployment figures are available, and he would know some further information about how they break down. We've got a caller on line 1. I see that's Tom. Good afternoon, Tom.
How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Heard you earlier today on the air.
Yeah, what do you think is the next move of
our folks here in Guam that are trying to have this plebiscite. Now that we're hearing about Congress is now being involved, where there's a man named Christian Adams testified before a subcommittee of Congress about the racial
racial Congress urged
of the plebiscite law that we have.
Yeah, that was on page 1 of the Post as well today. Congress urged, look at Guam's racial discrimination. That's the article, right?
Yeah. I tried to find that on that hearing on the internet, but I couldn't come up with because I wanted to listen to the testimony, and I wanted to hear the congressman's response, to the person giving the testimony, but I couldn't come up with it on the internet. So, but what do you think our folks here in Guam is going to do? What do you think is their next move now?
Well,
how long are we going to have to wait until we have a true plebiscite here? Or are they going to continue to push this local plebiscite law that we have in the books now, where only indigenous are allowed to vote in it?
Well,
do you think Congress is going to force Guam to repeal that law and come up with a non-discriminatory law, plebiscite? Why?
Well, I was going to bring this up later, but let's go ahead and talk about it now. The attorney for Dave Davis appeared before Congress to press his point of racial discrimination on the part of Gov Guam. This is actually what he's charging is a kind of reverse racial discrimination. That's been going around for some time. Actually, it started back in the civil rights movement days of the late 50s and early 60s, where before the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1965, to restrict discrimination on housing and whatnot. These were actual. Well, the lawsuit was 14th Amendment, equal application of the laws, but for him to go to Congress and say that Gov Guam is zealous, blatant, brazen, to me, it reinforces the point that George Estacchio made in his column the other day, that Congress should go back and look at the laws it passed concerning political and economic development of the territory and what it intended. Congress can void laws made by Guam pursuant to the powers that were delegated to it in the Organic Act, but it did not. Congress has been aware that this Native inhabitant Chamorro-only vote plebiscite has been on the books the whole time. And Congress has had, since the Organic Act was passed, has had power to overturn Guam laws. This has kind of evolved over the years. Congress now does have, but before our elected governorship bill, it was the Secretary of Interior could overturn Guam laws. Even if the appointed governor signed off on a bill sent to him by the legislature, the Secretary of Interior could override him and administratively void Guam law. And then they removed that from the Organic Act in the late 60s, early 70s. But they never did touch the Chamorro Land Trust Act or the Chamorro Only Voting Act. They left it, and Guam courts can void laws, but they can't do so on the grounds of violating original congressional plenary power over the territories. But they use constitutional restrictions on the power of American government at any level to issue laws, rules, or regulations that violate the Constitution. That was the Davis case, and that was a point that was what was being pointed out by Dave Davis's lawyer when he was testifying in Congress. So he was saying that the Congress should look into what the court found. But the Congress has the territorial clause and a treaty obligation to Spain that gives Congress the power to make all needful rules, to make all policy concerning each of the territories. In particular for Guam, Treaty of Paris, 1899, but also the constitutional provision on plenary powers in the territories. We are not part of the United States, but the Constitution restrains government officials at all levels and people who offer public accommodations, such as hotels and transportation and any kind of government program. Nobody can, who's tied in with the government at all, can discriminate. You can as a private individual. But what Davis was arguing is that the government of Guam cannot. However, in the lawsuit, they stayed away from the Congress's plenary powers. It delegated when it created the government of Guam and has refined the Organic Act over the years. It has delegated power, the plenary powers of Congress, to the government of Guam. And so this is the question of why, whether they should take this, the bill, and appeal it further to the Supreme Court. Because in the Supreme Court, they would argue that the government of Guam is a creation of Congress that has plenary powers of the territories, and it's not part of the United States. And so the government of Guam has an obligation to follow through on the political and economic development of the territory, and so has the power to do something which objectively and in all other cases would be seen as discriminatory. The court doesn't have the right or the power to rule any other way, because it was talking about the government of Guam. But it means the government of Guam is being treated in the courts as a part of the United States government. And in fact, it is. It's an it's an instrumentality of the federal government. So we're in a real quandary here, and that's why tomorrow and Friday there's going to be a conference, and it's bringing together experts from around the country and around the world who have gone through the process, both within the United States, in the case of Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, or outside the United States through the UN, to take a look at the results of the Davis case and look at what is the next step. And the reason that it's important to take a look at this in an academic sense is because the academic folks have to look and see where were we stopped in the past, where was it supported, where was it not supported, and where do we go from here? Because the question's still open.
Where is that conference going to be held at?
I think it's already closed. It's going to be broadcast on PBS Guam, and it's going to be available. No, it's tomorrow and Friday, but there's not enough room in the venue that was reserved to allow the general public to come in. It's a purely academic, but it is going to be broadcast by KGTF, and also should be available for examination online. I would imagine. I haven't seen anything in the paper, but perhaps tomorrow they'll tell us when and where we can watch it. The public can observe, and so I would encourage you to do that. I'll try. But does that help?
It's going to be at the UOG, right?
No. It's one of the hotels, I think.
Oh, okay.
But does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah, I would like to take a chance. I would like to go. Maybe there might be some no-shows where there might be room, you know. I would like to attend that thing personally. I'd like to really hear.
I got the impression that it was one of the small meeting rooms at the Hilton or someplace, the Hyatt. But it wasn't a large room for for the public, but it makes sense if you're going to share the information coming out of the conference and not be interactive with the public. It is academics, decision makers, and former administrators.
Yeah.
So that they can frame the historical context, the legal context, and the procedural recommendations that have been tried and failed and why, and then what other procedures are available to make this go forward. We want to make it go forward, and I believe it's going to come out as being that the Chamorro only vote is just one vote. There will be other votes that include everyone, but this particular vote is only a poll of the people from whom the land was seized by the U.S. government from Spain and for its own property while there were people living here and their consent was not given. And we need to get beyond that. It is recast in the Davis case as being a voting rights issue and as being equal under the law, but it's almost like saying Dave Davis saying that he thinks he should be entitled to war reparations. You know, not everyone's eligible. And
I heard that the Department of the Interior is funding all of these conference, right?
Well, the Guam Commission on Decolonization applied for and got money for a public education program, and this is one way they're spending it. They can't really spend, after the Davis case, until it's appealed to the Supreme Court, those rulings stand, and it effectively prohibits the government of Guam from doing, and any of its employees, and using any of its resources, its funding or its whatnot, to fund a vote that doesn't include everybody. That's the court's ruling. But the public education component for the status vote was funded by the Department of Interior. They've got a lot of money. I think it's $300,000. And it can't be spent on potholes or GMH. It was requested for this purpose. And so even if they're going to blow the money out like Ray was saying this morning on the conference participants coming halfway around the world with their entourage, staff and whatnot, even if that's the case, the money was provided by the federal government in order to have a public education campaign to address this issue.
Okay, but let me see what else I was going to ask you. So maybe I was just wondering whether all of the different options, representatives of the different options are going to be there at the conference. I don't want just the independent folks that are going to be there, and not the other representative from the other options.
I would imagine that all of the representatives of the other options, which are actually members of the Commission on Decolonization, are those people for whom seats have been already reserved. So they can hear it themselves, and so that when questions come up in subsequent meetings of the commission, they'll be able to remember what was said in the conference and use that information to go forward. The the independence people, Michael Bevacqua and company, are just like the statehood proponents and the free association proponents. They're all running political campaigns in order to reach people on how they may want to vote and for what reasons. That's a political campaign. It's not a public education campaign. It's advocacy for one of several items on a ballot for the public to choose from. That's a political campaign. And Michael Bevacqua and the independence people have been working on this for several years very actively. Not so the statehood or free association people. So
yeah, that's what we're
But go talk to them and ask them why they're not either moving or giving up the seat to somebody who's going to. I've talked to them, and I asked them this. Why is it that you guys can't be active? Why is Michael Bivacqua the only one on the stage? It's because they haven't been active, and they're not being active. They're letting everyone else do the talking. Just today, there was a therapist who came by today, and she comes by every week to do therapy on my dad at the house. And so when she came in the door, this is the very question on her lips. She wanted to talk to me about this before going in and working on my dad. And she was saying, the independence people are saying it's going to be like this and like that and the other. Well, I'm afraid this is going to be too, something, right? And I said, just wait for the campaign. The statehood people are going to have to be out there with information just as the Free Association people, and don't wait for the government of Guam to do that. You see what I mean? It's a campaign. It's not an academic exercise. It's a campaign making promises for the future. And then we'll have a vote, and that's campaign and campaign and politics and election.
I hope they'll let the people know when are they going to televise it so the people can listen.
Well, I'm hoping that tomorrow when we open up our newspapers, it'll be there, so people can tune in. Thank you very much, Tom, for your call and for your concerns.
All right. Thanks. I'll talk to you later.
Sure. Bye. Okay, bye-bye. It's 4:50 and time to take a break here, and we'll come back with more Tall Tales.
This is Ronnie. Ronnie is about to break his piggy bank.
Come on, piggy bank.
Ronnie wants to upgrade his smartphone.
And this piggy's gonna help me.
If Ronnie had signed up for GTA's handset payment option, he could have selected a new smartphone with an affordable monthly plan.
I could have what?
Exactly. Sign up for HBO at GTA and don't break the bank.
I'm sorry, piggy bank.
Terms and conditions apply. GTA, we start with you.
30 years ago, the very first Subway restaurant opened in Guam. Now, 15 restaurants later, Subway Restaurants is celebrating this milestone with a buy one, get one free offer every weekend, starting September 14th through October 12th. Come celebrate 30 years. Enjoy your favorite sandwich, salad, or wrap, all made with freshly sliced veggies and bread baked in every store. Take advantage of this buy one, get one deal. It's Subway Restaurants' way of saying thank you, Guam, for 30 wonderful years. Subway, make it what you want.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
And welcome back to Tall Tales for a Wednesday afternoon. It's about 4:52, and we'll be taking a break at the top of the hour, make room for Fox News and for our halftime show, and then we'll be back to talk some more about things going on in and around the island. Interesting topic that Tom brought up on his call and his concern. I've spoken with Bob Klitzkie, our own Bob Klitzkie, about this, and I won't say we generally agree, because he wants to make a point on the stuff that Michael Bivacqua is putting out there in the public. And as you can tell by my comments, I'm not faulting a proponent for doing what he's supposed to do. I can't fault him for having the stage if the others who are also supposed to have this stage won't go on stage. There's no reason to fault him for taking advantage of the vacuum of information, the vacuum of a campaign by the statehood and free association proponents. And also his Tom's concern about going to Congress. This fellow, J. Christian Adams, he's a voting rights advocate. So he's talking about voting rights, but even Congress doesn't extend voting rights to American citizens in the territories. And that is because Congress has plenary powers, has not incorporated this land into the United States. It's a possession, not part of. Congress has the power. So he's going and complaining to Congress that Guam is discriminating. But when the original Chamorro Land Trust Act and also the plebiscite, which was actually a representation, an update of the old law for this. It goes back to the 70s. You know, in early 82, was it 81, 82, there was a public education campaign and scheduled for a vote, but they didn't have the vote because people were objecting to the lack of objectivity on the part of the contractor who was hired, paid to lay out for the public the advantages and disadvantages of each of the political status options. I remember reading that document at Mr. Wampat's office in D.C. when I was going to school there. They showed me when I came in one day. They said, "Oh, this just came in. We know you're interested in this subject, so here's your copy. Sit down and read it." And I had a copy until a flood destroyed my assembled papers from my research. But even as I was reading it, just cold, scanning it for the first time, I was negatively impressed by the quality of the work. And I know the people who worked on it. I met them later. I didn't know them when I was back on the island in the mid-'70s, but I was appalled at what was passing for an objective public education campaign. And so the vote would not have been valid. But also consider that until the people of Guam were considered after the census count to be a minority in the land, the vote would have been including everyone. It wasn't going to be Chamorro only. That only came up after the census determined that the people of Guam, because of in-migration from mainly the states, but also from the Pacific Rim, Philippines, and Micronesia, and the outmigration of the descendants, the native inhabitants of Guam and their descendants from 1899 and also 1950 for the Organic Act, as defined by the federal government. But outmigration of those people from Guam to the U.S. mainland. Combined, the native inhabitants of Guam and their descendants became a minority in their own land. And that's when they started to distinguish for future pushes on whether it was going to be Commonwealth or whatever the political status would be. The vote would only include those people who were identified by the federal government as being the people impacted by the Treaty of Paris with Spain in 1899 and the Organic Act, when the U.S. government turned over administration of Guam from the Navy to the Secretary of Interior. And this was in the books. It was allowed to be discriminatory because it was the homeland of the people who were living here, from whom there was no formal giving of the land to the U.S. government. So the vote, this Chamorro-only vote, let's just call it that as a shorthand, although it does include some people who were not Chamorro, is intended to complete that process of going beyond, coming from a pre-1950 population to a post-1950 population. It's just been delayed. It's 4:59 already. Thank you very much for joining me here. I'll be back in about 6 minutes after our look at Fox News and the thrilling halftime show. Enjoy the show, and I'll be back in about 6 or 7 minutes, and I'll be looking forward for your calls.
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
If this was a bellwether, the president likes the ring. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Some pundits had predicted that Tuesday's special elections in 2 North Carolina congressional districts could be a good indicator of what to expect in the 2020 elections. The GOP takes both of them. Republican Dan Bishop beating Democrat Dan McCready in North Carolina's 9th congressional district. Bishop telling Fox News at Night.
Tonight is testament to the fact that Donald Trump remains very popular in North Carolina. I think he's going to do well in 2020, and I'm going to do everything I can to help President Trump and also to see to it that Republicans regain a majority in the House of Representatives.
Bishop won the race by less than 4,000 votes. In North Carolina's 3rd congressional district, Republican Greg Murphy easily wins election. The seat left vacant when Congressman Walter Jones died in February. President Trump tweeting congratulations to both the winners. The president reportedly considering 5 candidates, all of them within the administration, to replace former National Security Advisor John Bolton. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham telling Fox's special report he wants to make sure the replacement can work well with other parts of the national security apparatus.
But what are we looking for? Somebody that can work with Pompeo, can work with the Department of Defense, that can get the interagency stood back up.
Bolton either quit or was fired on Tuesday. Senator Graham says which does not matter to him. CIA issuing a rare statement Tuesday criticizing CNN for its reporting that a CIA asset was withdrawn from Russia over fears that President Trump could put him in jeopardy. The agency says the report was false and misguided. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also debunking the CNN report. A tornado has torn through Sioux Falls, South Dakota, downing power lines, collapsing some structures. No word on any injuries so far. America is listening to Fox News.
We can't buy this house.
What?
It has 4 bathrooms. Just think of all the bathtub rings, water spots, and stains, plus the cleaning products I'll have to buy.
Didn't I tell you? The house comes with a non-electric Connecticut water treatment system. We'll have clean, soft water throughout the house, protect the water-using appliances, keep the tub, showers, and sinks looking like new, and help our skin, hair, and clothes look and feel great, too. The house even includes a Connecticut drinking water system.
A Connecticut system in the house? We'll take it.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your NFL fix every Friday on Sports with Blake. Get the latest updates as Blake and Mike break down the upcoming action. Get your game on with the boys on the hotline, 888-TALK, or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome prizes that get you through the NFL season. The NFL Picks on the Ray Gibson Show is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
It's Wednesday. It's the 11th of September, 18 years later.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
What seems to have happened is that we had an aircraft intentionally fly into the Pentagon.
We do have a confirmation of apparently another plane crash about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh.
Services to remember those who died in the attacks to be held in Pennsylvania, in Washington, and in New York City at Ground Zero today.
2,753 people died when hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 and United Flight 175 into the north and south towers of the World Trade Center.
Heavy smoke coming from the building of the World Trade Center.
Those crashes ultimately brought them down.
20 city lights, second going down.
10-4.
10-4.
The victims ranged in age from 2 to 85 and included 343 New York City firefighters, 23 NYPD officers, and 37 Port Authority officers. The 9/11 memorial now stands in the footprint of the towers in Lower Manhattan with the name of each victim from the attacks etched in bronzed panels around the twin reflecting pools. In New York City, Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
A potential treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. Veterans in several states are finding therapeutic benefits in beekeeping. A vet in Manchester, New Hampshire says caring for the hives helps them focus, relax, and become more productive. It's not a new idea. A government pamphlet printed 100 years ago advocated beekeeping as a treatment for returning World War I soldiers suffering from shell shock. Big changes could be coming to rideshare services in California. State lawmakers have approved and sent to the governor a bill that would make drivers for Uber and Lyft employees of the company, not independent contractors, as they are currently classified. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
And there they go, the marching band off to stage right. I've marched in a band before, and that's where you want to go. You want to be able to finish and get off the stage. Welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie, who will be back in 26 days. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before the halftime break, we were looking at the Post article, which ran on page 1, about, and this was, we were talking about it because Tom wanted to talk about that topic. The Post article, Guam urged, look at Guam's racial discrimination. Congress urged, look at Guam's racial discrimination. In KUAM, their story is Davis attorney to Congress, stop funding Guam's political status education. And this is what this attorney was saying to Congress, a quote. He said, quote, when Dave Davis sought to register to vote at the government office, his registration form was marked void by election officials. The form is in my written record, my written statement, he said. Even in the Jim Crow South of the early 1960s, Southern registrars were not brazen enough to deny the right to vote explicitly on having the wrong racial blood. Congress can do something. For one, stop public funding of racially discriminatory election public information campaigns. Congress has exclusive power in the territories and can stop this. Commission on Decolonization Director Melvin Wampat Borja said it's hard to argue against a public education effort, and it won't stop the commission from continuing. He said they expect to expend the balance of the $300,000 in grant money from the Interior Department by the end of the month, and will continue to seek funding for their education campaigns for as long as it is available. He said the governor is expected to announce a decision on further legal challenge to the plebiscite ruling before the October filing deadline. So there's a couple things that are really important there. Even this attorney says Congress has exclusive power in the territories. So even they can allow the government of Guam to conduct a tomorrow-only vote. However, the courts have the power also to stop it if the government of Guam, as a federal instrumentality, is trying to administer that process. So, if there's another process, I've looked up, I was going to suggest to a local company, a local nonprofit, to be the administrator for the vote. However, when I did some research on it and looked back at the ruling specifically prohibits any companies that are created pursuant to Guam law from conducting this vote. Now, in the conference tomorrow and Friday, I do believe they're going to come up with an idea on how to proceed with this vote, and it'll also become clear what other votes are available that will be done later on. Okay. I've got Jesse on the line. Jesse, welcome to Tall Tales.
Hey, how's it, Daryl?
Just fine, just fine.
Just wanted to ask, you know how the Congress is has power over the territories, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the courts, where does the court fit into that? I mean, if Congress has a power and they say, like, yeah, okay, we'll allow the tomorrow-only vote, because, or what if Congress just says, okay, Guam's an unincorporated territory. It's not even fully protected by the Constitution anyway. And since we have power, we'll just let the Chamorros have this vote.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know unincorporated territories are not fully protected, are not guaranteed rights under the United States Constitution. As a matter of fact, nowhere in the Constitution does it mention colonies.
Right.
So,
only territories, only property.
Right. And apparently it seems that the Spanish basically conquered Guam, right? Obviously that's happened. Spanish conquered Guam,
mm-hmm.
and conquered or stolen, whatever way you want to say it, and took that property and handed it over as payment to the United States, right?
Right.
So in a way, the United States is in possession of stolen or conquered land, and you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like, wouldn't it be like if I went into your house, like tied up your family, and then threatened to just kick all of you guys out or whatever, or sent you on your way, and then I just say, okay, put my flag here. This is my house now, and everything in it belongs to me. And then some other guy comes in, we have a fight. The other guy beats me, and I say, okay, man, I'm going to surrender my stuff to you, even though this didn't really belong to me to begin with. I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah. Exactly.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
you're describing it, but you see, and you had originally asked the question. You said Congress has power over the territories. Where does the court fit into this? The court responded to the question before it. The question that Dave Davis put was, can the government of Guam continue to implement the vote, the plebiscite as it is reflected in Guam law? if the Guam law is in violation of the Constitution, and the court said that it cannot, that the government of Guam cannot, because the government of Guam is an extension of the federal government, and the federal government cannot be discriminatory.
Okay.
Okay? But Congress has the power over the territories. And that's why when I was just reading the KYM story from last night, that they point out that there's going to be, that the government of Guam may appeal before the October filing deadline to pursue the case to the Supreme Court. And one of the arguments could be and should be that the Congress allowed that law to stand for 20 years and has always had the power to repeal it, and the government of Guam was created by Congress as an extension of its territorial clause. And so it can authorize, it can it can provide tacit approval. The court was not responding to that question.
Oh, okay.
It was responding to whether the government of Guam, as an instrumentality of federal law, of the federal government, it is administering laws, which is the law on the plebiscite. And can they discriminate? And the answer came back from the court, no, it cannot discriminate. And to me, it seems proper. The government of Guam is part of the federal government, and the federal government cannot act in contravention of the Constitution. However, the people of Guam, the native inhabitants who are identified as eligible to vote under this Guam law, they still exist. The government of Guam the government of Guam cannot administer the vote because it is part of the federal government, and that would be unconstitutional. However, the people from whom the land was taken retain the eventual power to express themselves on what the political status should be. There are other conditions, there's other procedures to make that happen. And it may not happen because of plenary powers of Congress. Congress might, but the question is now before us, should we be allowed to vote? And if they go to the court, the Supreme Court, with this question, it should probably include, doesn't Guam have the power, and the government of Guam specifically, have the power delegated to it through the Territories Clause to conduct this plebiscite?
Right, because sorry, it just because according to Bob, the last time I called, the Congress determined, it said in the Treaty of Paris that the native inhabitants' political status to be determined by Congress.
Yes,
and
it was in the treaty.
And what we got was unincorporated territory. That is our political status.
But you see,
now can Congress go back and say, okay, let's remove the unincorporated territory for these people and just leave them as when we first got it from Spain? You know what I mean?
It could do anything it wants.
To honor the native inhabitants, and this unincorporated territory status or territorial status was basically, that we didn't know what to do with it at the time. We just had to stick a label on it, and because that's what the treaty says.
It's not
like
just
it went halfway. You know what I mean?
It's not just a label. The land belongs to the United States.
Exactly.
It does not belong to the people who reside here, and that is not the way that the United States government is set up. A government is derived. A government is created by the people, and the people give the government their sovereignty. The people give the government the power to act on their behalf. That's why you've heard me say this. Those guys downtown that are elected, they were elected to do our bidding. They don't do their own. The government of but the government of Guam, once we elect these people, the government of Guam, and they stand up and they take the oath. They are no longer they represent us, but they are acting in the capacity as federal officials for the purpose of administering administering the territory of Guam. And so they're not administering a state, and the people still do not have are not the ones recognized as having a say over the land. Even Dave Davis doesn't have a say over who this land belongs to. The land belongs to the United States, but the land
Congress has the power, right, to do whatever they want with this land.
Yes.
Because it says in the Constitution of the United States, Article 4, you know what I mean? Section 3 of that, you know.
The territorial
that
clause.
Congress, the territorial. It says plain and simple right there that Congress has, and that's why Bob, I guess, too, was alluding that there's a lot of things, all we have to do is ask Congress.
That's right.
Why
and that's
go through all this court stuff and just go straight to the Congress and say, look, the Chamorro people have a desire to you know, get back their land and everything and give it back to us, you know?
Well, the thing is that Congress has recognized the power of the people of Guam to form a government. They say write a constitution,
but it's not our land, right? So they can even tell us, okay, you guys can get out of here. You guys, we ban you guys from this island because we own it. You know what I mean?
That's right. And all they'd have to do is compensate.
Exactly.
And that's just a matter of money, you know, and they can print the money. They don't have to.
So that's why I'm just, the thing that I'm saying is if Congress has the power, that's who we need to go to, I think, instead of going through this court thing, you know?
Yes. Also,
because the Constitution is the highest thing in the land. You know what I mean?
Yes, and the research really should go back to, and maybe it'll come out in the next couple of days at this conference, but the research, if it's not been done yet, it should be done now. And I think Arnold Leibowitz did this. I think he's the one that did the research and put it in his book. My copy of the book's really stuck together. The mold and mildew got to it. But and then they stopped. The copy I have anyway wasn't edited about 40% way into the book. All the typos are in there. It was printed with all the typos from the draft. Like somebody just typed a draft and stuck it in, and nobody else looked at it before it went to the printer. It's amazing. I've never seen a book, a thick, hardbound book printed like that with all the typos.
Wow, that's cool.
But and you can still tell what he's saying, but it's just kind of odd to read. So the Congress somebody needs to remind the Congress of what its original intent was by making the Organic Act. And it'll come out that the people of Guam that Guam was not to be part of the United States. We were just taking them out from under the naval government, and we are defining the people who would be covered under the Organic Act to be the descendants of the people who were covered under the Treaty of Paris. And it's all in the legislative history, the hearings and the statements of intent, the statements
They acknowledged the Native people, right?
Yes, they did. They acknowledged the Native people in the Treaty of Paris because that's a treaty obligation to Spain to make all needful rules, and they put in the treaty a restatement of what's in the Constitution because that's all they could really negotiate. They said, well, we're not even going to talk about it now. Congress is going to make the rules. They made no rules until 1950. So that is sort of where we are here. And it is something that the Congress itself can explain to the people. And because they're politicians and we don't elect any of them except Michael Siniclis, and he's not able to vote on this. When this is taken up, they will rule basically on whatever it is politically will allow them to keep their seats in Congress. It will have nothing to do with establishing justice because it's not in their interest to politically establish justice. It is in their power, and it is their expectation that they will do what's best for the United States.
Right.
But this is what George Ostaki was saying in his column. He said, go back and ask Congress to explain their their rationale for passing these laws concerning the territory and what they were intended to do. And that's where the answer will be.
Exactly. That's what I agree with that, Let's try to head that in that direction first, Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanted to chime in on that.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Insight. Okay.
Appreciate
thanks.
the call. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
That was Jesse, and we're just talking about the finer points of political status. Did you see, I learned a new term today, and that is psycho-recycling inhibition. Now, we're not recycling psychos, and we're not being inhibited about psycho-recycling. It is not often you open the newspaper and you find an article that only an academic could love. It's not often you get that. Written way above my understanding. But it started at page 18 and then it was continued in most part on page 25 of today's PDN. And it's about recycling. But psycho-recycling inhibition is a concern about how others see your recycling, your practice of recycling, and then forming an opinion about you based on your recycling habits, and allowing that concern over what they think of you to influence your behavior on recycling. So that's the lesson of today. Psycho-recycling inhibition. Do you have psycho-recycling inhibition? You might. Let's see. Carl, do you have psycho-recycling inhibition?
I don't even know what that means.
I tried to explain it. Are you concerned about the way that people see you recycle and does that concern modify your behavior concerning recycling? Do you care what others think of you?
No, I don't care. I don't care at all what others think of me. I don't waste any time. I don't lose any sleep on it.
Okay, good. That you do not have psycho-recycling inhibition. I'm safe to say.
No,
Congratulations,
I'm pretty
Carl.
Sure. I've got some inhibitions. That isn't one of them.
That isn't one of them. Good. Okay, check that off. Okay, Carl, you don't. There may be some others who do. They're overly concerned, but not Carl. Good. So what's on your mind, Carl?
Yeah, I was just listening to the conversation between you and Jesse regarding the issue of political status. And, the difference in our situation, I believe, between us and some other places that were colonized is that we were, after the Spanish-American War, we were basically, as Bob has said, we were part of this, this group of Spanish colonies that were basically a prize of war. I think it involved the Philippines, Guam, Cuba, Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And the Philippines made their push for independence, or some of them did anyway, and it went through. Cuba, went on their own. Eventually, Puerto Rico never did. They're still wrestling with that idea of statehood, or what direction they're going to go. But for myself, I believe that in the 40s we actually sought our present status to go from a basically a prize of war to what we felt was the next level up, which was a territory, and we wanted citizenship. We just didn't want to remain a coaling station stuck out in the middle of the Pacific. And especially, I think, after the war, the movement to do that became much more aggressive, and we successfully realized that. So our present status was something we actually sought out. And in the decades after the liberation, over 70 years, there were no mass protests, there were no letter-writing campaigns to our representatives, and Chamorros are not passive people. I mean, I recall seeing photos of the protests in reaction to some comments in a book put out by George Tweed about his time on Guam, and there was not a positive reaction, and there was protests, and they really vocally expressed their opinion. So they knew how to protest, and they knew how to express their opinion. And for me, I take the fact that we collected money, sent representatives to Washington, and over time sought this present status out. We eventually, had the Organic Act created. And in the years after that, there was really no mass public reaction against it. And to me, that conveys that my mom and her generation who were here during the war liked it. After the war, they had a choice to seek independence or to seek a closer alliance with the most powerful, most prosperous country on the face of the earth. They wanted, I think, they made a rational choice in choosing something that would give them some level of security if an invading power tried to take us over again.
When did they express that? You said they made their choice?
And all the terrible things that happened, and they weren't really interested in that. They wanted a closer alliance with a
But Carl,
military power.
When did they say that? When did they say that? You said they made the choice for security. When did they make that?
There was no formal plebiscite or vote drawn up, but just the fact that of their actions, I think, conveyed that this is the direction they wanted to take.
Which was no direction at all?
Basically, in which there was no formal reaction or protest or letter writing or cornering our representatives locally and in Washington, D.C., and conveying dissatisfaction with our present situation. To me, that conveyed that this is the direction we wanted to take. It was like a daily informal plebiscite. Admittedly, it was informal. There wasn't anything in writing, but this, to me, conveyed the will of the Chamorro people, including my mom and my uncles and aunties, who over 50 years, when I was with my mom, she never said anything to me negative, about the United States and, this is something we need to get away from, and I really hate this relationship we have with the United States. I never, even one time, heard anything. So to me, this was my mom and her generation conveying their will and their wishes as far as our political status.
And what status is that? You're saying that we have a political status?
What we presently have now, the unincorporated territory. And by the way, I'm not for, as some people say, status quo. I would like to build on what we have and move to something that I think is better. And I think, in my view, that would be something that did not go through the first time, and that would be Commonwealth. We would still have the protections of the Constitution, protections of our freedoms, our personal freedoms, which I think are precious, and we would have other things that we would enjoy, including a relationship with the United States, and we would have more control of our destiny.
Carl, let's pick this up on the other side of our break, okay? Can you hang on for a couple of minutes?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, we'll come back with Carl and the points he's raising right after our seventh inning stretch.
Whether you're going grocery shopping, taking the kids to the mall, or going to work, you need a reliable car that can take you where you need to go. A reliable car also needs reliable insurance. Let Nanbo Insurance make your auto insurance easy and uncomplicated. With Nanbo, you can also save big when you bundle up and insure your car, home, motorcycle, or business. Enjoy great savings up to 50%. Visit Nanbo.com or call 477-9754 for more details.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
The serious side of what millennials care about and how they're bringing some valuable changes to the workplace. I'm Jerry Robertson. At 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about this sometimes misunderstood generation and what they want.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try Mescla's featured special for September. Southern Spice Crispy Fried Chicken. Louisiana-inspired fried half chicken. Served with red beans and rice. Available in Agana and in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
Back with more Tall Tales at 5:35, and I'm Darrell Taggarty sitting in for Bob Klitzkie, who will be back in 26 days. We've got Carl on the line, and Carl's been sharing his thoughts about our political status and changing political status, kind of as a continuation of points brought up by Tom earlier in the show. Carl, would you like to continue, or do you want to kind of discuss some of the points you made?
Yeah, my basic feeling is I am not for, as some people say, passively sitting here and remaining status quo. I would like to build on a foundation that has gotten us this far. I believe we have many tools that we can use through our representative, our delegate in Washington, that can give us more control over our labor laws, more control over our immigration laws. We can pursue a constitution. The 50 states have a constitution. We should have a constitution. And Bob said, and I tend to agree that the simplest way to do this would be to patriate the Organic Act and amend as necessary. Whatever anyone's opinion is of the Organic Act, it has served to get us to this point. And I'm, as I mentioned, I'm for Commonwealth. I think we need to go back and revisit that and tweak whatever needed changing. I believe we need to improve on the Jones Act to make it less of a problem for us. So there are many things we can proactively do. And so, some people come up and say, well, we don't even have a vote. We're powerless. But I like to remember the famous saying that one of my favorite senators, former Senator Al Israel, used to say, "Have mouth, will talk." And as former delegate Robert Underwood, I believe, rightly said, one of the most important things a delegate has is his ability to log roll and create relationships and networks and use those to get things done that we need getting done. So anyway, those are a few thoughts on that I'm thinking about what was being discussed.
Well, thank you very much. Carl, I'm going to pick up on some of your discussion and respond to some of the questions and see if we can get a clearer understanding of where we are in this whole scheme of things. I have another caller, and I'd like to find out maybe that caller will bring those points up. So can we go to the next caller?
You want me to go offline and just listen? I mean,
Yeah,
that's fine.
yeah, and then we'll continue. But thank you. I've been writing some notes on what you've been saying. So let me go ahead and pick up on line 2. But thank you, Carl, for your call.
Just one other thing, Darrell. Thank you for allowing me to express my thoughts. You didn't interrupt me or anything. And I'm sure you had other thoughts about them, but you allowed me to fully express what some thoughts I was thinking.
Well, I'm glad you were able to go through them all, and I'm trying not to interrupt you because I was kind of concerned about going on from topic to topic to topic and not answering any of them. But I'm glad you got all of your thoughts out to its own natural conclusion because it holds together nicely. And so you're most welcome. I'm learning, not to interrupt.
Well, I am too. It's a very interesting topic. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Carl.
Sure.
Okay, and let's go to line 2 and see who's there. Oh, Governor Leon Guerrero is on the line. Good afternoon, Governor.
Well, I caught part of the topic this afternoon, and I just wanted to, when I was doing some research into Puerto Rico, what was real interesting is they had 2 statehood votes that were rejected by Congress because status quo was not an option. And then the third time they did it, they had status quo as an option, but they only had, it was approved by 90% of 20% of the population. So it was rejected because not enough people voted. So that's something we need to bear in mind, that if we ever get around to it, that we need to make sure that we include the status quo option. Otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels, because the first 2 attempts by Puerto Rico were rejected by Congress because it didn't include a status quo.
And this is why it's important to have people who are objective observers of the process, who have been invited to this conference here on Guam tomorrow and Friday, to allow them to provide some of this perspective, because we're all looking, whether you're talking about the viewpoint from within the United States or outside the United States, we're still working within the context of the Territorial Clause and the Treaty of Paris, which specifies that it is Congress that will make all needful rules for the inhabitants of the territory. And so...
Well, I just personally, me personally, I think we don't have any credibility with Congress going to them for any type of status change until we do the basics, which is pass a constitution. Once we pass the Constitution, I think we'll have a little more credibility when we go to the U.S. Congress to request a status change. But until we do that first part, I don't see how we can even attempt to do the second part. But that's just me. I'm obviously not one of the committees.
Well, and it may be that was a concern before, back in the 70s, which is why we had the Constitutional Convention. And it was the people of Guam who rejected it because it didn't have things in it that the convention realized that Congress wouldn't permit us to address in our own constitution. And so the people of Guam didn't approve it in 1979.
As I recall, and bear in mind I wasn't here during that time, but I was listening to a big debate that was held on, they had one of the constitutional scholars on the radio a couple of years or so back, and I don't remember who it was, but and one of the things they pointed out was, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, that the Constitution that the people of Guam rejected, they rejected it because it required just like the other states, that we have to, obey all relevant federal law or something like that. But my point is that if we can't get a constitution enacted, I don't think we'll ever have any credibility. And when we do go before them, we have to include the majority of the population. We just can't go to a minority of the population, because 90% of 20% got rejected by the U.S. Congress is not a true representative of the population of Puerto Rico, So we need to get past that historical definition and acknowledge the fact that the majority of the people who qualified for it once upon a time have moved to the mainland, and the people who live here now, a lot of them do not qualify according to that. But that's a false benchmark. We're residents of Guam. We should all be entitled to have a say on this, but it's going to have to be done by a NGO group because, as you pointed out, the federal government and its agencies can't be involved, and it has to be a credible effort. But it won't be credible if we don't have our own constitution, number one, and it won't be credible if it doesn't include an option for status quo, and it won't be credible unless a majority of the population participates in the vote.
And that is the crux of the issue.
Yeah, that's why Puerto Rico isn't a state. Yeah. On that last go around, because of the corruption in the politics, the minority parties boycotted the vote, and as a result, the turnout was only 20% of the population.
Right, and Puerto Rico doesn't have the same population and suffrage issue that we have. Even if they allowed everyone to vote, the numbers of people who have come in from the outside would not be statistically significant. On Guam, over the passage of time, especially since we wrote this Constitution of Guam back in 1977, with the passage of time, the demographics have changed, and one of the reasons the demographics have changed is because we have not moved on from our political status, and it was taking too long to try to get some of the projections of what Guam was supposed to be like, both as a community, as a body politic, to pass its own laws and not simply administer the Organic Act, which was federal.
Well, I remember because I was working for the Pacific Daily News back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And, I spent a lot of time around the legislature as a result of that back then. And to the best of my knowledge, nobody in their wildest dreams ever thought Guam would have 170,000 population,
No, it wasn't projected. It wasn't projected, but I'm just taking a look at this copy of the Constitution, and I'm just looking to see whether any of the issues that we had talked about in the course of our Commonwealth discussions were included in the Constitution. That's one of the reasons why we only had the one constitutional convention turned out a document, and then it didn't pass the people of Guam. They said, no, there are more things in here that we want, but they said, no, we can't address the relationship with the United States in our Constitution. And so people just said, well, I'm not going to bother to go vote on it then. And so it's real chicken and egg, truly chicken and egg. And what were the issues? Then what were the issues in the Commonwealth negotiations? What were the sticking points? Immigration. We can't have control over immigration, although the country is trying to have control over immigration now. That was not allowed to the people of Guam back then, even though we saw it was a serious demographic issue. And we had no vote on laws affecting Guam, and that can't be addressed in our Constitution. Mutual consent on the laws being passed over Guam, concerning Guam. That was going to be part of the Commonwealth Act, the draft Commonwealth Act that we were going to present to the Congress, and they said, the executive branch said, no, you can't have mutual consent. You can have a constitution, you can have a Commonwealth, but you're going to have to follow all the laws of Guam, and we're going to make them for you, because you still are going to have no seat on the voting seat on the floor of the Congress. At the very same time, it was known that the United States government had negotiated those very same powers, control over immigration, no laws applying to Northern Marianas without the input and approval of the Northern Marianas government, the people of the Northern Marianas. And they didn't have, and they were allowed to restrict the taking of land for military or other national purposes. Those are the things that we wanted for ourselves. And it was already negotiated by the United States government with the people in the Northern Marianas just 40 miles away. And that was not allowed to be part of our Constitution, and it was not allowed to be part of our Commonwealth Act in the 1980s. And that's why, and then now we have the March of Time, and now we don't, and the people who are here still remember that rejection. And we're told, no, you can only have what we will allow you to have, which is your status quo. If you want to change to a constitution that includes everything in the Organic Act, fine, do it. But it means nothing until we say you can have it. And that was not in the works for creating a body politic. You can do anything you want as long as it's what I told you that you can do. That is the relationship. And that's the status quo. Ken, thank you.
You're welcome.
For the call. And I'm getting some comments online as well. But I'll talk with you later, and we'll go after this break to line 1.
We understand what matters to you because at Docomo Pacific, we're a family too. With the Now Family program, Mom, Dad, and kids stay connected on the latest devices the whole family can enjoy. For just $155 a month, get 3 lines with 30 gigs of 4G LTE data each, and endless use of your favorite apps without affecting your monthly data bucket. Add more, get more, save more. Docomo Pacific, better together. Some conditions apply.
30 years ago, the very first Subway restaurant opened in Guam. Now, 15 restaurants later, Subway Restaurants is celebrating this milestone with a buy one, get one free offer every weekend, starting September 14th through October 12th. Come celebrate 30 years. Enjoy your favorite sandwich, salad, or wrap, all made with freshly sliced veggies and bread baked in every store. Take advantage of this buy one, get one deal. It's Subway Restaurants' way of saying thank you, Guam, for 30 wonderful years. Subway, making what you want.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
And welcome back to Tall Tales for a Wednesday afternoon. We've got a few more minutes here to see what's shaken and what you have on your mind. I'm going to take a look at some of the comments on Facebook before we go to the phones. And let's see, where was I? Just got to see here. Okay, let's see. I already told you what Tito Guay had to say. Then Brandon Glazer says, what happened to the old man, or is this a new format? And then he continues, this is a socialist show now, bye. And I answered him back as a call in and present your point of view, but prepare to have it challenged. You know, you can label me. You can label me publicly, but actually the shorthand doesn't help, because you can label me and then you're not taking any kind of opportunity to advocate for your side. You just want to paint me, and that's, you know, I've said it out loud here, and you can call 888-8255 and say you're a horse's you know what. I'm good for that. Or you can educate me. You can. But, you know, tossing around the label designed to, you know, the red meat for people who want it to be either black or white and not admit to having a brown. It's either black or white. And some people just want to think like that, that there's only an up or a down, a left or a right, and one of them will win, and it has to be one way all the time. And so that's kind of how we got into this position. Talk radio, some talk radio shows like to play that up, and it makes for really good shows. And some talk radio shows seek to allow the free flow of information. And so, Tom, you're here.
Then that's what we should be fighting for. Let's go back to the Commonwealth rejection, and let's just negotiate, keep fighting with Congress about it, item by item, whatever it is that they say, no, you cannot have this, you cannot have that. Let's start negotiating with Congress, and let's get Congress to approve the Commonwealth status instead of trying to separate from the United States, because being part of the United States of America, I think, is the best thing for the future of our children, because the United States is the most powerful nation in the world. It's the most righteous nation in the world, in my opinion. We even have it on the dollar bill, on the American money. In God we trust. And on the allegiance, the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God. I don't see any other nation having that kind of wording in their money or in their Pledge of Allegiance.
That was only added after the fact.
Yeah, but
it was only added in the 1950s. But before that, it went for a long time without that. During the McCarthy era.
That's true, but we must never forget that the Chamorros themselves were colonizers. Because I would say 30,000 years from now, these islands were uninhabited. Then the Chamorros arrived to colonize the island. Then when Magellan got pushed over here by the typhoon, then the Spanish government colonized the colonizers. Then after the American-Spanish War, Spain lost the war, so America colonized the colonizing Spain, that colonized the Chamorros, that colonized the islands. So one colonizer got colonized by another colonizer.
Well, it would have been just fine if the United States did not ever reference the people here on Guam who were living here as of a date certain. And they did that twice. They did it in 1899, and they did it again in 1950. And in the meantime, between 1899 and 1950, they were an important part of establishing the United Nations and its committee to press the colonial powers to give up their colonies throughout the world. And we also fought against the worldwide domination of communism on neighboring peoples and stopping its spread. So you had the Soviet Union had Eastern Europe that it had taken, it moved into during World War II and then never moved back out. And then the only independent ally of Soviet Union that was independent of Soviet domination was Yugoslavia. But they tried to get into Greece, they tried to get into Italy, they tried to get into France. Then on the other side, North Korea. And that was, North Koreans would play off the Russians and the Chinese against each other because Korea had been dominated by the Russians at one point, and the Japanese and the Chinese. And so, but there's nowhere in the U.S. documents that says that the U.S. government is only going to recognize the people of Guam that they took the land from as being the people who were before the Chamorros. So you can make the point, but it was the people who were living here at the time in 1899 who were recognized in the U.S. government documents, and that's in the Treaty of Paris. And then in 1950, they recognized the people who were living here at the time, descendants of those 1899 residents. And it wasn't by race, it was by residence. And that's the definition. It would have been fine if we had the vote before the Chamorros became a minority in the land. And that it should have been done.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but you can even ask Bob Klitzkie when he comes back, and he'll tell you that the present political status that we have now is the best thing that anybody can have. The only thing that I think that some people in Guam are not satisfied with the present political status, if the Jones Act probably, and the fact that they cannot vote for president and vice president of the United States. But in my opinion, I don't care if I vote for president and vice president. None of the 50 states do anyway. It is not the popular vote that elects the president. It is the electoral college. They're representative in the electoral college that does the voting of the president.
Well, thank you, Tom, for your call.
I don't know me whether I vote for president or not.
Thank you, Tom. It's just about the last word on this because it's 5:59 and time to make way for Fox programming. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Yeah, I just wanted to make another point here before we go, and that is that in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, Guam, the residents of Guam were still smarting over the way that they were treated when the lands were taken for military purposes. That wasn't resolved until the 80s, 90s. I'm Daryl Taggarty. It's been my pleasure to be with you over the last couple of hours here at The Point on Tall Tales. I'll be back again tomorrow afternoon at 4. Tune in for Ray Gibson first thing in the morning at 6 tomorrow, and have a good evening, everyone.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The